As you all know, several years back, the state passed a concealed handgun license law that we've kind of been following for the last several years. This last session, there were some dramatic changes made to that law. But in the great nation of Texas, they don't put the law in one place where we can just go look it up and see what it says. It's in like 9 different books. It's in the occupations code, it's in the penal code, it's in the local government code. So what I did was asked our expert research man, Deputy Chief David Hale, to bring all that together and put together a comprehensive presentation that kind of gives you the full overview of the changes to the law. We've had a few questions, from residents. Some people saw the media coverage and said, okay, I understand I can strap on a gun and take off now. I want to do that. So, well, why don't we start with a license and then we'll go from there. But there have been a few questions. This law will in some way, either directly or indirectly, affect most all of our residents, our businesses, in one way or the other. You're gonna see guns where you may not have seen them before. Some businesses want to know if they can restrict guns in their businesses. And those are the kind of questions we're going to answer tonight. A little disclaimer, we don't have all the answers. There's going to be some of the answers we're going to give you is I don't know, because we don't yet. There's some aspects of this law that are going to have to be interpreted by the courts. They're going to have to be interpreted by the Attorney General at some point. We're not quite sure what the legislature had in mind on certain aspects, so we're going to just have to take those as they come. So don't be surprised if we tell you on some of the questions that we don't know, because we don't have all the answers yet. Just a little housekeeping. I do want to keep it too specific to the new license to carry laws. If you have a speeder on your street you want to tell me about, then come get me after we're done here. And you and I can talk about that speeder or anything else you want to talk about. But we want to keep it restricted to the new handgun license. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to David Hale and we'll get started. And feel free to ask questions at any point. And Dave, it's all yours.
All right, thank you, Chief. Like the Chief said, this is going to be an overview of what was CHL. There's some particulars in the law, and one of those particulars is it is no longer CHL. Some of you may have a license that says CHL on it now, and as long as it is still valid, it still applies to the new rules. And until it expires, you're fine. But then you have to go and do your renewal. And we'll get into some of the changes on the renewal a little bit later. But it is now called a license to carry. The legislation pretty much stripped the conceal part out of it and puts that option in there for a person who is licensed. The thing to remember is that for folks who are not licensed, those laws haven't changed. And like Chief Fuller was referring to earlier, you can't just go strap on your gun and wander down the street. There are requirements for you to be able to do that, and that is a license. And I have to throw in my disclaimer, I am not an attorney. So I have just done a lot of research in all the areas that Chief Fuller mentioned. And this law, the main point of that is it is complex. It was complex before, and it remains even more complex now that they've made some changes to it. And you do have to go and search out different areas of the government code and the penal code, occupations code, and look in those areas because you'll find little pieces of this law that impact all of those things. So, again, very complex law. Hopefully we'll be able to answer your questions, and I'll continue. Next slide, please. Some of the places, so when we're done here and maybe you have an additional question or it was one of those that we said, you know what, I really don't know the answer to that, it's not clear. If you want to go do your own research, because I utilize these sites, Texas Legislature Online, where the laws are actually, that you can actually read the bills that enacted the laws and end up going into our books. That is a very good resource. You can go back and search all the way back to whenever concealed licenses were first introduced, and you can kind of track it all the way through if you're so inclined. Trust me, it'll take you a long time if you decide to do that. Also, from that website, you can access the Texas Penal Code. There is a lot of information on it there, and the Texas Government Code is also available. The people who actually do the licensing are the Texas Department of Public Safety. For those of you who have already gotten a license, you know that. But their website also has a lot of information. It has a pretty truncated version of the changes on it as well, but that's a good site to go to also as a resource. And we've got some things posted. If you haven't been on the Farmers Branch website, we have some things posted on the police page that also are some question and answer also, and they'll look a lot like the slides that I have here tonight. So if you have additional questions, please utilize those additional resources. Probably the most important date and I'm not sure I tried to do some reading on why the legislature decided to pick certain dates that they did, and I couldn't find really the reasoning other than, I guess, trying to give the institutions that this is going to affect time to decide what they're going to do. But obviously January 1 was whenever the new license to carry kicked in. It's no longer going to be called a CHL. It can be a license to carry. And it allows you to carry on either in a shoulder holster if you choose to carry openly. It'll allow you to carry in a shoulder holster, or it'll allow you to carry in a belt holster openly. All right? And some of the details, whenever I was researching this out, and a couple of the questions that may come up, and if I can, maybe I can answer it before it's asked. You know, can you take, if you're a license holder, can you take and just stick it down the back of your pants and wander around? The answer is no. It says that you have to have it in a holster, either a shoulder holster or in a belt holster. Now, can it be inside your pants in a belt holster? Absolutely, but it has to be contained in a holster. It's the intent of the law. The second date is August 1st, 2016, and this is when concealed campus carry is going to come into effect. So we've got a little time on that, and I think it's given the public universities leeway to do what they need to do. It's on campuses of four-year colleges. Has to be a four-year for August 1st, 2016. August 1st, 2017 is when it's going to kick in for two-year schools. And so they're giving them a little additional time to try to figure out how they're going to go about dealing with it on their campuses. There are some exceptions once the campus carry laws kick in. Public institution of higher education is going to be able to regulate their storage in a dorm. Basically, in a nutshell, it says that a public institution generally cannot say that you can't conceal carry on their premise. But there are some regulations that they're going to be allowed to do to deal with dormitories and storage of weapons in dormitories, and so they're going to give them that time to be able to figure out how they're going to do that. They can also they can also restrict certain sensitive areas on their campus where a person may be prohibited from concealed carrying, but generally not the whole campus. But if they have some sensitive areas that they feel like that they do not want folks to carry concealed in those sensitive areas, they're going to have to they can do that, and they're going to have to post that as well. And I think the intent of that is that there's some, universities do a lot of research on a lot of different things, and they may have a special program going on doing research on who knows what, and they might, and those are the kind of areas that they're talking about restricting. But that all has to actually go back up to the Attorney General's office. They're not going to be allowed to just say, okay, well, we think this is a sensitive area. There's a process that they're going to have to go through to be able to do that, but it is in the law that they can do that. The other provision under campus carry is, and the key here is private universities. They're going to be able to restrict or prohibit, conceal, or open carry both. Only if it's private, though. And there's a definition for private. I didn't memorize it, but there's a definition for what is considered a private institution of higher education. They can choose to opt out, but a public university cannot. The other thing that really hasn't changed, that didn't really change in regards to concealed carry, is whether or not you can carry on a school, not a higher education, not a college or two-year college, but on the school. Those laws remain the same. You're not permitted to carry on the physical premises of a school or educational institution, with the exception of when campus carry for four-year schools kicks in. So that really hasn't changed. You can't carry it on the school bus. You can't carry it on any function that is sponsored by the school. You cannot carry at that location, because it's considered, if the school is actually hosting it, it may not even be on school property, but if it's sponsored and sanctioned by the school, then that becomes a part of that. The interesting thing also is that what is the definition of a premise? Premise means a building or a portion of a building. The term does not include any public or private driveway, street, sidewalk, or walkway, parking lot, parking garage, or other parking area. And I believe the intent of this is that if you're going to be going from one place to another and you are lawfully carrying your weapon in your vehicle, that they didn't want to restrict your ability to park and at least go there. So parking lots have kind of become a place where you can carry in. Depending on if you're a license holder, you can actually carry it openly in your vehicle. There's no restriction on that. But there's also, for folks that don't have a license, you can legally carry in your vehicle, but it has to remain out of view. So that's one of the nuances of the law, is that, if you're not licensed to carry, then it has to remain out of sight and out of view. All right, I'll say the question, and some of you probably already have it. May a private business owner prohibit, conceal, or open carry on the premise of their business? And the answer is yes. Through the posting of the appropriate signage under the Penal Code under 3006 and 3007, and I'll have a couple of other slides here in a minute that'll actually show that verbiage. But you can post that signage based on the requirements of the law, and you can restrict both of them, open carry and concealed carry, or you could restrict open carry, depending on the signage you post, or you could restrict concealed carry, or you could do both. But it's all based on the signage that you decide to post. And it's really two signs, but it has to be in English and Spanish for both of them if you're going to prohibit on both sides. And so most of the ones I've seen so far is they'll have English on top, Spanish on the bottom for open carry, and then the second one will be for concealed carry, and it'll be in English and in Spanish on the bottom of that. But if you want to restrict those, then it takes that signage to be able to do so. This is some of the, and it's kind of difficult to see. It's better up there. This is the verbiage under 3006 for a concealed handgun. So that's the one I was explaining first, and that's what you'd have to put up on your premise or on your property to restrict people with a concealed handgun from coming in. And then this one has the verbiage under 3007 of the Penal Code for restricting somebody who wants to carry openly on the premise. So again, to make it clear, you can restrict it altogether. You don't want a weapon on your premise, or you can restrict either or, depending on the signage you post. There's also a provision in the law, if you decide not to post, but you just want to deal with it on an individual basis, is that may a business owner provide notice verbally? The answer is yes. Of course, you can't say, okay, well, you came in and I really didn't want you here, so you violated the law. That's not how it works. If you don't have it posted, and then you're going to have to provide notice to them that you do not wish that they be there. You can do that verbally, or you can also, if you want to do an index card and hand it to them. I'm not sure the reasoning behind that one, but the legislature just gave us another option to be able to do that. So you can do it verbally or with a card of some sort that has the 3006, 3007 verbiage on it, and hand it to them. And then at that point, you have given them notice and they are required to leave your property. Another question that's come up too is court buildings, and this is where some of the nuances of the law become somewhat apparent. Is open or concealed carry allowed in a court facility, including a municipal court? And the answer is no. And this is where some of the nuances kick in the law. They're not required to post. You just have to know that. So that's kind of why we wanted to have this meeting, is to get that information out there, because there's some responsibility on the license holder to make sure that they understand where they can go and that it may not always be posted. So, and that is one of the places that does not require posting is walking into the court. And the language in the penal code also talks about it's not just the courtroom, but it's any of the associated rooms associated with the court that are a part of conducting court business. Something else that hasn't changed is that this is something that where the sign actually changes a little bit. It has to do with the Texas Alcoholic Beverage Code and the license to carry and how those two interact. The new law did not put anything in it that trumps the existing restrictions on license holders from carrying an establishment that derives 51% of their income from the sale of alcohol. And I know most people have seen those signs. It'll have the verbiage from 3006 and 3007 on it, but it'll also have a big red 51 in the background. And that requirement still exists there. And if that is posted, then a license carry person cannot enter that establishment. And that is based under Texas Alcoholic Beverage Code. And it specifically says in the law that there's nothing new that's been written that trumps what previously existed. Now, the question that may also come up is that like, well, my favorite restaurant has a little bar in it, and we like to go there and eat, and yeah, they serve beer and they have mixed drinks too. The whole thing revolves around the type of license that they are operating under. Most of those establishments, the standard restaurants that you go to, are not operating under a 51% license, because they're not getting the majority of their income from the sale of alcohol. They're getting the majority of their income from food. But you have to pay attention to the signage. Another commonly asked question is about public transportation. There was nowhere in my research that I find anything that prohibits you from carrying on public transportation. It's not mentioned anywhere that I can find. So can you carry on public transportation, for example, DART? The answer is yes. On motor vehicles, and this includes watercraft for those of you that own boats as well, that is considered under a motor vehicle under this law. May an operator of a vehicle carry a handgun in plain view in the motor vehicle? The answer is yes, provided that you have a license to do so. And otherwise, what I stated earlier doesn't mean that you couldn't have one there if you own the vehicle and you have care, custody, and control of it, but it would have to be out of view if you are not a license holder. But if you are a license holder, then you're allowed to have it in plain view. Government buildings. Can you carry in a government building in areas which the public has access, going to pay your water bill at City Hall, the lobby of the police department? The answer is yes, you can. The key there is places where there is public access, where and the police departments are a little bit different, and I'll get to that in just a few minutes. There's some provisions that are specific to that. Another common question is open or concealed carry permitted at a meeting of a governmental body? The answer is yes, it is, and meetings of a governmental body are those that fall under 551 of the Government Code. It includes not just council meetings, but also any other meetings that are posted and that are required to be posted. So the general base answer is yes, unless Unless that city government decides that they want to not allow it, then they can post it. Just for the government meeting, just for the meeting, not for the entire building, but just for that particular meeting, they can post and they can restrict that. But it has to be posted, otherwise it's not restricted. All right, now I want to move a little bit on to the police and license holder interactions. May a police officer stop a person who is carrying a handgun in plain view in a shoulder or belt holster and request that that person present their license, and this is provided that there's no other offense. I'm not stopping you for speeding, not stopping you for jaywalking, just that I see that you have it. The way the statute reads, the answer is yes, that we can do that. As a general rule, are we going to be wandering around every time we see somebody that has a sidearm on and go up and say, oh, got to ask them if they have a license? That's not generally what our perspective on it, but we do have the authority to do that. And we can do that, and it is a requirement of the license holder to present their license if we ask. The other one is the authority of a peace officer to disarm a license holder. And I'm going to read this one specifically. I know I don't like being read to, but this one here, it says, a peace officer acting in the lawful discharge of the officer's official duties may disarm a license holder at any time the officer reasonably believes it is necessary for the protection of the license holder, the officer, or another individual. After that interaction is done and there is no other offenses, and for whatever reason we've decided that we need to ask you for that license, and there's nothing else, no arrests occurred, we are required to give you the license back and give you your handgun back and send you on your merry way. This next slide is specific to police buildings. As you might imagine, at least in Farmers Branch, we have a detention facility confined within our police department. So the legislature saw fit to put in some provisions in the law that help us address those issues with maintaining the security of our facility. It says a peace officer acting in the lawful discharge of their official duties may temporarily disarm a license holder when entering into the non-public area of the police building. If you've ever been in our police facility, the lobby's wide open. You can come in there. You can talk to dispatch. You can talk to the records folks. You can go around, to the restrooms on one side. But then you're going to hit a door where the only people who have key card access can actually open the door and go back there. And that is for the security of our facility as well as the detention facility. And there are also some rules associated with the computers that we use to check people's criminal histories. They actually put some pretty stringent rules on us to keep that stuff secret, just in case you ended up with stealing a banana at one time or whatever. They don't want that access available to everyone, and if you walk by and you look and you say, oh, look, I think I recognize the name on that computer, that's part of the reasoning behind doing that. And so it allows us to actually, once we're no longer in the lobby and you need to come back into the facility, maybe you need to see a detective or you just want to talk to somebody about an issue, at that point we have the authority to disarm you. And disarm sounds horrible. What we're going to do is we've got lock boxes that are already out there, just like the ones we use whenever we go to the jail and lock up our gun to go inside the detention facility. Those are provided in the lobby. We're just going to ask you to lock it up if you're going to come back. Now we do have an interview room up front that we can talk to you. If it's just a short conversation, it's not necessary for you to come back. But if you do want to come back into the facility, that's what we're going to ask you to do, and we have the legal authority to do that under the law. And yes, you'll get to keep the key whenever we give it to you. We'll let you put it in your pocket so you can come back out and get it. I was talking a little bit earlier about, folks who already have a CHL realizing that the law has changed to a license to carry. And I mentioned that there going to be no requirement for you to go back and do additional training to maintain your license until that point at which you expire And then whatever that process is, you'll have to go through that. But one of the things that the legislature put into the law that applies to anybody who is making application for their license after January 1, so for today, they've added some new training on security holsters. And I think that was insightful on their part. So if you're already a CHL holder and you're not required to go back, I would encourage you to do some research on security holsters. And I'll give you an example of probably from day one, whenever you go to the police academy and you start learning what the rules are and the law and some of the tactics associated with dealing with encounters. The first thing they tell you is there is always a gun at every call you go to and at every traffic stop that you make. And, you know, a room full of new recruits, rookies sitting there going, really, everybody has a gun? And then they turn around and look at you after you get that dazed look on your face and go, wow, I didn't realize that. And they say, it's going to be your gun. You're the one showing up with it. There may not have been one there to begin with, but you just showed up with one. And then that gives them a great segue into how to teach you to retain it. And a big part of that retention is the type of holster that you wear if you're wearing it externally. There's also levels of holsters that apply to, you know, even if you're concealing it, but you want it to be really secure, there's different levels of security of those. So for folks who have already done it, if you haven't done that research, I just encourage you to do that for your safety, to make sure that you don't end up in a circumstance where it just accidentally falls out, number one, which is not a good thing. But two is, should you end up in a circumstance where somebody wants to try to take it away from you, that you have every advantage for that to not occur. And with that, that's our general overview. All right.